Welcome to the Media Buying War Room. This is where the top 1% of vetted media buyers break down what's actually working for them in paid ads right now. I'm Matteo, MediaBuyer.com founder. Today our media buyers are breaking down what to do when your performance drops, and it's not even your fault. Let's get into it.
Yeah, I have a topic in mind because it's just constantly come up over the last couple of weeks. Generally, when working with clients, I try not to consider the sort of macro environment too much, right? Because it's kind of control the controllables. So saying to clients, it's macro driven, it's really hard at the moment. They don't really want to hear that. They want to hear what can we do to fight against it. However, I would say this month has been probably one of the most challenging in a while, certainly for the sort of longer standing clients and the ones that are UK based and also US, to be honest. And obviously, it's not an easy time. Macro environment isn't fantastic, and you've got the stuff going on in the war and so on, or the threats of the war. So they're a lot more susceptible to sort of seasonality or macro impacts and so on. And I was just curious if you guys are seeing this, how you deal with it. I think one of the beauties of being a freelancer is you get to see those macro trends very clearly because you get multiple accounts to look at. But yeah, it's something I really try not to lean on or talk about too much. But there's also a reality that I think it's having a bigger impact right now than it has done for 5-6 years. So curious on your guys' take.
Great question. Okay, do you have any takes on the Google side of things or some of your other accounts?
Yeah, I think Google naturally as a channel is probably one of the most impacted by, I guess, consumer trends more broadly because it's search intent driven. So if people are looking proactively for things, that's generally an indicator of kind of the demand in an auction or in an industry more broadly. And then you're also kind of balancing overall category growth at an e-commerce level, but then also category growth holistically across omnichannel. And naturally, when those things stagnate or begin to decline, you then have to look at taking market share from other players as your only real strategy for growth. In order to do that, you have to be hyper competitive in that market. If you're lucky enough to be in a market where there isn't a lot of competition or you have a relatively differentiated product, often you get a lot more headwinds in terms of easy, quick wins and traffic and conversions on the back of it. But there, in those industries, there's generally much less capacity for growth more generally because there's smaller overall customer demand. What I would say, at present, we haven't seen a massive impact more recently necessarily, but we've definitely seen, if I look at UK e-commerce specifically, we have a range of clients in terms of growth perspective. So we have certain clients who are still capturing about 50% year-on-year growth, and that's on a pretty big multiple in terms of overall turnover. We have other clients who are currently sitting at about a 35% negative year-on-year growth. And the ones who are in negative decline, it's partially strategic in a sense that we have decided to hyper focus on profitability and cut marketing spend quite aggressively to improve margin and net profit. But the business as a result is in quite bad decline in terms of top line revenue, which is not a very sustainable position to be in for the long term. And for them, that is, the real reason is their product offering is not as competitive as it needs to be. Their price point is above quite a few of their core competitors who are selling similar products. And also they're seeing the overall macro impact that the UK market is stagnant, if not declining, for most e-commerce categories right now. So to Charlie's point, there definitely is an economic squeeze in the UK. Haven't necessarily gone into full recession yet, but there's a lot of signals that they're moving in that direction, and therefore consumer spending is squeezed. And ultimately that impacts it impacts the ability to be profitable as a business. Typically speaking, traffic from all media sources, Meta, Google, and others, is typically increasing. So your CPMs and CPCs, very, very hard to manage to get negative CPC growth year on year without very aggressive tactical implementations, which even still is hard to do. And when you do see CPC reductions, it generally comes at a loss of quality from a traffic standpoint. So therefore, if you accept increases in CPC year on year, you need to net out increases in price to net that off. And obviously in a very saturated market with a lot of price competitiveness, you can't afford to do that because you just eat into your margin. So it's just a challenging reality of business that I think very few people want to accept. I think we've seen a lot of it post-COVID, where a lot of e-commerce businesses boomed because people were sitting at home and had nothing else to do other than buy shit online, especially home and garden sector, which I work in a lot, had the most fruitful 2 years they've ever seen because everybody had nothing else to do apart from paint their house and redo up their bedroom and redo their sitting room. And then whenever people went back to real life and started spending a portion of their money in restaurants and bars and going on holidays, they had less disposable income left for home renovations.
Yeah, I think you put it very well and makes a lot of sense. And I would also agree that on Meta, we always have that big lever of like creative and trying to create something a bit viral that can fight against this. But Google, it is a lot harder. You feel much more at the whims of sort of overall market intent. I think where this month I've done more so is just trying to provide that context just to help them make good business decisions. And obviously having oversight on a few different clients means that I'm probably like, they can speak to their friends, right? But they don't see the numbers in the same way that we do. And I think I've learned this month, I hate to harp on about it because it feels like almost like an excuse for performance, right? But I think it's very important because it provides context and helps decision making. And the clients that I feel we're working with and making good progress with, we are focusing a little bit more on that net profit number. But yeah, I think where I've kind of slightly flipped on it this month is trying to provide a bit more of a sort of macro view to help with the decision making. And I think it has been a sort of positive thing to bring to the table. And also with Google Reps, I've been getting them to produce sort of trends and intent to help paint that picture, which has, again, been helpful with like decision making and avoiding panicking and just trying to work with the current environment. And then I think in terms of like the key levers to fight against it, like understanding, that's very helpful, but sort of control the controllables type thing. Like Google and Google Rep, they will always try and push you to decrease your ROAS, right? And be more competitive in auctions and so on. And if you can afford to do that, that is obviously a very effective way to gain impression share. But that's not an option for everyone. So I think those accounts that are active on paid social, more push channels, it's really trying to leverage creative messaging and offers throughout this period to sort of fight back against that seasonality or macro intent that you might see.
Mm.
And then just to add to that, actually, I think where we're in quite an interesting time at the moment is a lot of the stuff you can do creatively is actually quite light lift. Like it's, we covered it before, it's that sort of lower production, native type stuff. So I think that is like obviously very appealing right now because it's super cost effective and it's super impactful. But just trying to create the foundations to do that effectively through briefs, pitches, the right videographer, the right sort of AI editing, that sort of thing, and try and focus on that sort of lighter lift, cost-effective stuff that can really help fight against it.
Yeah, and things that are in your control, ultimately.
Yeah.
How about you, Ogie? You kind of touched on that as well, but if there's anything that you wanted to add there, please.
Yeah, I guess from an assessment standpoint, I would kind of echo Charlie's points. From Google, the easiest thing you can check is overall search demand for the core queries or the head queries within your industry. That gives you a general barometer as to whether the overall search demand is growing, and typically that means customer demand for that product offering is growing, or if it's declining, or if it's shifting. So again, trying to understand whether there's breakout categories or terms within a bigger or broader industry. And if you can find any of those key trends, that may be signals towards looking at pivoting your business in terms of your product offering and looking at where to focus your buying moving forward. So like I personally, the more time that I've spent working with e-commerce businesses, I fundamentally think the success of a serious e-commerce player, and I'm talking kind of 20, 30 million turnover plus, is all in your ability to buy the right products at the right price. So having a really strong buying team, having the right networks in place with manufacturers to actually source products from the right places at a good price is fundamental. Like another big thing that we would look at is overall auction intensity. So the number of players in the auction and the percentage impression share that those individual players have and how that's changing over time. This, in my opinion, this is the most accurate real-time understanding as to how your competitors are doing as a business. If you see large fundamental shifts in their shopping auction intensity, there's a high likelihood that they're struggling financially. And that for me is often an indicator as to where to push and where to go more aggressive after certain competitors if they do that. But if it goes the other way and you see lots of other competitors consolidating and pushing more aggressively and taking market share from you, sometimes you've just got to retreat and give them that share, because if you can't convert the traffic effectively, you're just running your business into the ground. And that's where it's like you've got to make sure that your conversion rates are strong enough and your profit margins are strong enough to compete in those categories. Because if you're not, you're essentially just going to burn money on more, impressions and clicks that don't ultimately convert for your business.
Yeah, I mean, Simon, we chatted a little bit about it earlier this month. The balance of controlling the controllables, but also accepting macro conditions and the best sort of strategies through that.
Yeah, I mean, very interesting and obviously very relevant at the moment as well. That's probably why the question. I guess my take is initially it's a conversation with the brand, client, whoever you're working for, and I think that's a really important initial first step to help them understand that some things are controllable and some things aren't, and for the things that aren't controllable, what is the play? So I think understanding from them, is maintaining revenue levels the most important thing, then great, then we sacrifice a bit of efficiency. But if, maintaining margin or something along those lines is the priority, then great, we can work on ways to support that, most likely through reducing spend and just focusing on areas which we know are real bankers, rather than pushing too hard into new audiences or testing too far outside the box of what we'd usually be testing. But yeah, I think it probably does boil down to that, to be honest. It's just managing expectations and making sure that clients are aligned with what is actually possible. Because I think at the moment, there's probably some brands that are hurting. But I think there's a natural trend for a lot of brands to have a strong January, February, and then for that to kind of taper off into March as we head towards Easter. I always feel like Easter is a real breaking point for a lot of brands. So I think we're in that kind of natural progression anyway that we see each year, but it's obviously been exacerbated this year, just with world events and therefore impacts on price sensitivity just for consumers. And I'm seeing that with quite a few brands, just conversion rates are down. But having that conversation with the brand and saying, it doesn't matter if we change this or change that or fix this. At the end of the day, there's just more people competing for less eyeballs, or more people competing for an audience that are less receptive and less willing to part ways with their money on non-essentials or things that they deem as luxury items, etc. So I think just being very open and honest around what's happening and what's possible is just super important.
Very similar. One thing actually I was keen to jump into, Simon, on your point around Easter. Like we've seen typical similar, right? Easter is a very poor trading period for most e-commerce brands. As a result of that, do you try and proactively put in place any measures to, I guess, reduce wasted spend over a negative seasonal period like that?
Yeah, very good question. So on the Meta side, I'm probably similar on Google as well. I'm pretty heavy on cost cap campaigns. Probably, I'd say, feels like more so than probably other like agencies or freelancers. So that naturally will take care of some of that downturn anyway, just by having those mechanisms in place. But yeah, otherwise it feeds into kind of what we were just talking about before. It's managing expectations with the client and helping them understand that it is a lower period and we'll potentially drop some ad spend out just to mitigate that over that period. But yeah, Easter's a weird occurrence, and we're pretty heavy on supplement brands and health focused brands, and so we feel it a lot because it's January, February are great, and Easter is just a complete no holds barred. They're eating chocolate. Any health New Year's resolutions are out the window. And yeah, I do each year see Easter as that breaking point of kind of New Year's resolutions. That's the kind of the final nail in the coffin around health New Year messaging completely tapering out, and then it's moving on to something else after Easter.
Yeah, I was interested what you do, Ogie, because I feel like Google can be pretty unhelpful during those like quick seasonal downturns, and actually you can find that if you do nothing, you can like overspend on Easter at terrible performance. How do you cope with that?
Yeah, like that's a really big pain point, to be honest, and especially for clients, because what typically happens on periods like Easter and even just a lot of bank holidays more generally in the UK for us is there's actually still a lot of search demand, but conversion drops off a cliff. So we see Google will spend and generate shit tons of traffic, but very few of them will convert into customers. And as a result of that, we then try and proactively put in place pretty large negative seasonal adjustments across all campaign types. So in the region of kind of 15 to 25% negative seasonality adjustment over the kind of 3 or 4 day period across search and shopping campaigns in order to force Google to expect a lower conversion rate and therefore force it to spend less in the auctions. Sometimes it works. Sometimes Google still gets a bit excited and overspends. The other big thing to look at is what your rolling 30-day average ROAS is versus targets. And if you're trending over target and have capacity to spend necessarily, that's also a much more dangerous position to come into those periods in. And therefore, if that is the case, increase ROAS targets the week beforehand. So your ROAS achievement is sitting kind of in line or slightly above, your targets are sitting slightly above your achievement. So Google doesn't have the flexibility to overspend, plus adding the negative seasonality adjustment on top of that.
I've massively been there when Google treats the daily budget as a monthly budget and you see that majorly bloated weekend spend. It can be very hard to explain to the client. You said there that you mainly increase ROAS targets to avoid that. Do you do that as a preference to just putting stricter budget caps in place?
Yeah, I never use budget caps on Google, to be honest. We typically would have budget caps about 50% above average daily spend. So there's lots of flexibility in budget, and budget caps on Google don't really work very well because Google can also spend up to twice your daily budget on any given day if they see demand to do so. So budget caps is not a very effective way to limit spend. There is one additional thing actually, Charlie. So we recently, as you know, Google sometimes can go crazy on a daily basis. And we actually decided to build a script, which is an automatic kill switch if the account reaches a certain spend threshold. And that actually, for the first time, triggered yesterday on one of our larger accounts where we're not 100% sure, but I believe one or two competitors pulled back aggressively. And therefore, we were looking at about a 50% increase day over day. And as a result, about 9 p.m., all of our campaigns got paused by that script. So that is it's kind of like an inverse cost cap for the overall account level. And it's because we had an occasion back in January where the account did spend about 100% more on a daily basis and it didn't return very, very little. And it was for that very reason. A competitor pulled out of the auction. There's loads of available clicks. So Google give them to the next nearest competitor who's still available. So as a result, we've now put that across pretty much all of our accounts, which is, it's just like a safety kill switch that will turn off all campaigns once spend reaches a certain threshold.
Just suggest that was productive. You didn't risk missing out.
No, it saved us a lot of money. I think we probably would have spent an additional 20,000, which would have been waste. So yeah, it was.
I would probably just finish with, and it's similar to my Black Friday theory, well, not theory, like execution strategies. Either like play the game or don't, but don't think you can do well without jumping in with some kind of offer or promo message. Certainly the brands in the US that we work with, if they don't go out with a strong 4th of July promo offer, then they really don't do well. People are in the mindset of deal shopping. So, I think it's, you either play the game or you drop your ad spend and let the other guys ride it out, but don't keep ad spend or try and scale over that period and expect to see a good result.
All right, appreciate you watching. So this is the type of stuff that we cover every single day inside of our Catalyst community. At MediaBuyer.com, we've spent half a decade now vetting over 10,000 media buyers. Less than 1% get accepted. And the people that you just watched are just some of the people who are leading this community who you get direct access to. They don't just look at your ads, they're full stack, and they look at the entire business from the ads, the offer, creatives, funnel, and they're able to tell you what's working, what's not, and what they would do differently. So if you want in, there's going to be a link below to join that. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.